there. I make that silly face whenever we go live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Good morning for me. Good afternoon for my guest, Susan, today. Hello, hello. My name is Margaret Pinard. If you are new here, I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author and an eclectic reader. I am also a co-host of Climathon, and in that respect, I'm doing this series where I highlight folks who are up in arms about something with the climate crisis, and I'm calling it Truth and Reconciliation for the Climate because truth and reconciliation processes around the globe have been an opportunity for people to come together, try to process trauma by speaking truth about their experiences, and then get into solutions. And some are further along that road than others, but I think we haven't even started on it for climate. So welcome. So that's the series. And my lovely guest, Suzan Palumbo, I'm going to give her introduction here. Suzan Palumbo is a Trinidadian Canadian dark speculative fiction writer and editor. Her work has been nominated for the Nebula, Aurora, World Fantasy, and Locus Awards. Amazing. She also co-founded the Ignite Awards with L.D. Lewis and co-edited the special Caribbean issue of Strange Horizons magazine. Her debut dark fantasy horror short story collection, Skin Thief Stories, is out now from Neon Hemlock, and her novella Countess, a Nebula Award finalist, was published by ECW Press in 2024. Her writing has been published in numerous lovely venues, and you can find her on Blue Sky. I will pop her links in the chat in just a moment. When she isn't writing or here talking to fans, she is often sketching, listening to New Wave, or wandering her local misty forests. So that is the first thing we have in common. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. No one's ever invited me to talk about anything with respect to climate specifically. So when you asked this, I jumped.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I was just at a resilience sort of progressive meetup last night with some folks in my community in Portland, and we were talking about the fact that like we can't do everything, but we can focus on one thing and keep going and eventually be able to sort of connect and build a stronger community. So this is the one thing I can see to do at this point. And so I'm glad people are joining me to like contribute their expertise and everything, their perspectives. So, climate crisis, it's a thing. And how did you become aware of it? I think we all come in like different generations and different ways that we come to our awareness of like, oh shit, this is where we are now. So how did that happen for you in your life?
This is an interesting question. So I was born in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago. And my family in Trinidad and Tobago they're in the South, and the South has a lot of former plantations. And that's why we were there. We were brought over as indentured workers and enslaved people to work the plantations. And so farming, after that all ended, farming and animals and planting things are just a regular thing for me. When I was growing up, like my grandmother kept cows and she milked them by hand. And they did a lot of growing of their own food and stuff like that. And so when we came here to Canada, my mom is very connected to growing things and animals. She's upset. All she does is send me pictures of animals from her backyard. She's really into that. And so the environment and growing your own food and these types of things have just always been with me. And it's also part of my family. A large part of my family is Hindu, and so they're very into sort of beliefs about everything on the earth being connected and things like that. So I come from that sort of background. And then, you know, when you're at school, they teach you about recycling and they teach you all of these things. When I was a kid, they were talking about the hole in the ozone layer, which disappeared because we worked on it, and it's not there from what I've heard. I don't know, but that's what I've heard. and acid rain. And when those things started, I really took it to heart. And so I've always kind of been involved with environmental things and caring about the earth. That was a long answer.
No, that's good because yeah, we get a little bit of like a religious and cultural background, we get a little bit of experiential values, and then we also get like education contributing its part as well. So it's very well rounded. Like you
Yeah, it
took.
was a lot of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so then to switch to like your background and to your current creative work, I've read Countess. I reviewed it last year on the channel, so I was a big fan, very excited about all the intersectionality going on. And the reason I thought of you in terms of climate crisis is that in the book, it's very important the view that people had of like sustainability and like working together and having different points of view to contribute to being able to work together. And there's lots of economics theory in there as well, which I won't touch on because I think I'll lose people. um, but where does climate concerns where do climate concerns sit, as I said, in the forest of topics that you consider? Because there's a lot going on just in Countess, and I haven't read Skin Thief yet, but like how do you conceive of that in all the different things that you want to discuss and mold in your creative work?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about it as a whole, not the novella. I
Okay.
so I have a I seem to have and I didn't realize this at first. When I first began writing, I kept writing about nature and shapeshifting, but I didn't realize I was writing about nature and shapeshifting constantly.
Oh, okay.
It was something where I had written, had written about dear women in the forest, and then I have written a story about a girl being lost in the forest, and then I had written a story about a woman who turns into a snake. And it was fully on like 6 stories before I was like, whoa, what's wrong with you? Why do you keep writing about this? So I think part of it is subconscious, and it's part of all of those things from my background that sort of are in the back of my mind coming together and coming out. I don't think it was intentional, where I was like, I would like to write about the environment, so I'm going to sit down and write a story about the environment. I feel like when I sit down to write about what's important to me, the environment just comes out somehow in the story and has a significant part to play. Um, but I do like writing about things being in balance, I think, or things, a natural way for things to be, and then restrictions placed on that. And that, I think that's where the shape shifting comes in. It's also a queer thing, but it's like, this is the way something should be, but no, we should contain it, and we should change it, and we should make it this way, and then that thing sort of rebelling against that restriction. I think that's really what I'm kind of getting at
Okay.
with that. With Countess, um it was a large part of just the history of the Caribbean being a place where um, people came in, they started extracting natural resources, and then that depleted. And I felt that, and this was more deliberate with Countess, that we are experiencing that kind of on a much more, I don't know if I want to say global scale, but it feels like it's happening again.
Yeah.
Um, that we're depleting everything, and then we're going to have to go out to space, and then when we get to space, when we get to Mars, what are we going to do? We're going to deplete Mars, and then we're going to go somewhere else. It feels like a pattern to me, and I wanted to address that.
Great. Melissa saying, what a fascinating writing powder pattern to discover about yourself.
You know what, when you write, you really discover things about yourself. The echoes and stuff that you pick up, like the subtext is all there, but it's not always intentional, and you have to finish the work in order to recognize it. It's kind of scary.
I know, because you don't know what you're letting out the front door and like telling on yourself.
No!
Totally. I've had that experience as well. Yeah, 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 yeah. One of the things you said was like restrictions, and to me that says like from an authority, and it sort of reads religious. It codes religious for me, but it could definitely be other aspects that do this and that you rebel against. So I find that really interesting. And if let's see, am I going to roll this into the next question, or am I going to go off on a tangent? Let me just
You
decide.
do whatever you want to do. I'm not restricting you. This is not authority here.
Oh, okay. So what I did want to say is, for all the Booktube nerds who might be watching and like listening with the reader angle, Countess is a great book to read, or a novella to read, for Caribathon, which happens every June, and is hosted on here by two lovely booktubers for Caribbean author reads. And then also Pride is June and sometimes July now for some states and celebrants. And so like both of those, if you're interested in doing readathons or thematically reading or mixing it up in a certain way, and you want certain content to learn about these issues, beautiful book to see both of those at the same time. Let's see. We have a swink. There's a reading, right? There's a reason writing requires courage. Yeah. Oh. Great point. Great point. All right. So I did mention that I went to a resilience meetup last night, and I always have to sort of buck myself up to go to these, because it's like sharing and really bearing yourself to see what you can do. And in this one, I actually came up with something that I felt pretty good about, which is one of the books that I've read for Climathon is We Want a Better Catastrophe. And one of the reframes that they had in that is that, you know, if you have a runaway train, which is what it feels like this faster and faster depletion system is basically doing, our economy and the rest of the world, if you can't put the brakes on, if you have no way to like stop the legislators and the crazy people who are announcing these edicts, like your shirt says, no gods, no billionaires, then what you do to make it less of a catastrophe is sort of build a little parallel train, so that anyone who can see this is not going to work can jump off onto the other one. And so to me, that means like fostering community, building resilience, trying to figure out like, how can you get along without importing these things? How can you get along without using these convenient companies and that sort of stuff? So that's the sort of solutions that I think of. But I'm a historical fiction author, so I see the previous rounds of this and I see the present rounds of this. And you've been writing, or at least this novella is about the future. So one of the questions I had thought about is about how do you approach the woven strands of these like capitalist billionaire class, this extractive industry, the historical threads as well, and put it in the future? How is that translated for you?
I think that's an interesting question. I think people, I wasn't really extrapolating. You know, when I wrote that book, right? When I wrote that novel, we could have just changed it and made it 30 years in the future or whatever.
Yeah.
I took everything that was happening, everything in that book. I mean, obviously, I like, you know, we're not space captains and stuff like that. Like, I made that part up. But all of the economics, all of the judiciary things, all of the climate things, all of the relationship things, everything is now. So I didn't really have to like speed up time, or I didn't really have to think of anything too complicated. I just took this and put it in the future. And the reason why I did that is because you mentioned you're a historical writer, right? And you're like, okay, well, I can see the patterns from the past and I can see the patterns now, and you can see how they match up. And I'm like, well, unless something happens between now, something drastic, right, between now and the future, it will match up again. Ugh. Right? So a lot of people, you know, when you write science fiction, everyone is thinking, oh, well, it's about gadgets and it's about and all this stuff. And I'm like, no. I have just made a premise to critique what's happening now. And it's been kind of scary for me a little bit, because what happens to the main character in Countess is actually happening right now. There are, like, you know, people being taken away. And she encounters a guy on the transport to the prison who's just been picked up, and they're like, oh, well, everyone says they're innocent, you're just going to jail. Like, it's happening now. So it what I did was I wrote what I thought about what's happening today, or what could happen today, and I set it in the future. And so everything that I thought about the different aspects, like when you create a world, you have to create a religion, you have to create an authority structure. If you're writing about that, you have to write about their economics. So I just wrote about today.
Yeah. Chilling. And yeah, my thought was depressing, Melissa, because like, yeah, if we don't do anything now, it's just going to keep going and reproduce itself. And Kat loves your shirt as well. So
This is from Little Ghosts in Toronto. They're an independent bookstore, and they make the shirts themselves.
oh, nice.
So
Very cool. Okay, well that makes sense because I think I'm not an expert on sci-fi, but I know there's a subgenre called space opera, and basically it's like soap opera that's set in space. So it feels like it's a reflective, emotionally resonant, could be set in the present day, set in space kind of story. Then is what you're saying? Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
um. All right, so let's see. Decolonization. So the topic, the title of this is decolonization. And for people who may not have a firm grasp, I looked up the definition. There's several sort of more specific, less specific, and it's been a while since I've studied this stuff. But definition I have here to share with everybody. I should probably put it in the chat so that I can give it for visual learners here. So decolonization is about cultural, psychological, and economic freedom for Indigenous people with the goal of achieving Indigenous sovereignty, the right and ability of Indigenous people to practice self-determination over their land, cultures, and political and economic systems. Yes. So when I think of decolonizing, I feel like there's some element that is in pop culture, pop psychology maybe, that is like decolonize your mind and decolonize your workplace and decolonize your mental health practice. And it feels a little glib, but if you get back to like, this is a very traumatizing historical trend that has been going on for hundreds of years, it's going to be very hard and very slow to extract ourselves from this on all sides, whether you're from the descendants of colonizers or colonized populations. And so a lot of people have done work on it, and I'm just sort of like picking up my little rock and carrying it a few miles into the future. So I wanted to ask which aspects of decolonizing you're most called to use in fiction? Is it when people talk about their bodily experiences and being in the body? Is it like relationships when they think they're, a pawn in someone else's game? What do you play the most with in fiction? It's a very
I
long
think
one.
no, it's a good question. I mean, whenever you answer a question about literature, I think, if you've written a good story, in my point of view, if you've written a good story, you've touched on all of those, right? Because you have to situate someone in a place in order to sort of explain, well, why is their body reacting this way to the place, and the place has certain rules, but you can focus more on one than the other. I tend to focus on bodily things just because I lean kind of horror in my
Mm.
writing. And so I tend to focus on visceral sort of reactions of where you're sort of not in contact with your body, and then all of a sudden you are. Or in the case of the book, it's not a spoiler to say she gets thrown in jail, and jail's very bad. And so it's that sort of very jarring experience of, you were sort of living in comfort, and now you've understood that the system you're in is not friendly to you, and so you're going to have a bodily reaction to that. by being basically tortured in jail. So it's a commentary on the being sort of acknowledging the government aspect or the social aspect, but it manifests in a bodily reaction or in a personal mental reaction. I think that's what's happening in that book specifically. um yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes. And it's making me think about other things. So when I am thinking about Virica, I'm thinking about how, like, the most, I won't say the most painful, but like the first kind of like in the story is the betrayal, right? It just sort of starts the
Right.
story. And I feel like that speaks so much to where we are, at least in the US, in our politics, and that people have bought into a system and basically sold themselves to this system in terms of believing in it and hoping it will bring them fortune and whatever. And waking up to the fact that it's not serving them, as well as at the same time it's oppressing other people, it's like that's a really hard step to take. And maybe you need to be thrown in jail and tortured to get over that sort of like brainwashing of colonization of your mind. So I don't know.
Well, I don't advocate regular citizens being thrown into jail and tortured generally,
How else
but
can you accomplish this? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it is. I think it's really painful. Like I can understand being part of something and then all of a sudden realizing that it's not good or it's not as good as it's been portrayed to you. And also, people tend to have a thing where it's like, oh well, this is not any comment on a person. This is just how people are generally. They tend to be like, oh well, I'm not doing that. That's other people. I would never do something like that, or I don't hurt people, or and then when you're confronted with that no, you are that, you have two options. You have sit with the discomfort, or you have rationalize it, or be like, oh well, no, that's still not me because blah 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 blah. And that's really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a great place to say if you have questions for Susan, please put them in the chat. And
I
also to
see the
say,
comments, and yeah, I had a friend, Darcy, Little Badger. She's native, and she was harassed at the airport, being asked, "Are you American?" And she was like,
well, according to which treaty?
"Yeah." And that was really upsetting for her, and I was upset for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's just there's so many layers. There's kind of like, okay, the person trying to kidnap this Native American is not even conscious of the layers of irony in all this. You're just kind of like, where do I even start? I would probably get that very frozen look and be like, how do I even start with you? It's super frustrating.
You also have to be careful. You can't really, because sometimes, people ask you, like, "What are you?" Right?
mm,
And you want to be like, who asked me this, right? But then you're like, are they going to hurt me? Like you have to balance that sort of confrontation. It's
mhm,
hard.
mhm. Yeah. Like, yeah. You see in media how people respond and they're treated, but maybe they don't have the same privilege as you do, or vice versa. And so you're just like, okay, what do I do to protect myself? Number one. And then number two, like, how do I change this interaction for myself and others in the future? Yeah. Um, in terms of something you just said, which is trying to make that step of like not believing it's all good and hunky dory, into sort of thinking critically about why things are the way they are and what we can do to change them. And I do think we should be changing what things are like now. Radical statement, I know. But here I'm going to drop another little like promo. So I'm doing a series of interviews with folks. We're all going to be bringing books every weekday in August, and we're going to be talking about agitation. So like what has us up in arms? And I really want this to be an opportunity for people to think critically and engage with really deep thinking books. And so we're bringing lots of stuff, not necessarily climate related, but like radical politics changing, other kinds of things that people really care about. So hopefully you'll join us for that. I'll have graphics out soon. It's just on the to-do list. All right, so other questions. You talked a little bit about the gardening, and that's one thing I wanted to like elicit a little bit more in terms of, I don't know, theory or feeling maybe. So besides fiction, what other areas of interest are you working actively on decolonizing for yourself? So for me, like that's, I don't know anything about plants. I never learned about plants in school or had time for it with all the extracurricular activities in school. It wasn't what was highlighted. Learning about fabrics and how to like sew and mend, learning about local foods and how to cook them in season. These are all things I've only started going after myself as an adult. And I think that's part of like decolonizing, because that's essential stuff rather than what they want us to be focused on, which is being part of the machine of extraction. So how about you, the gardening and other things that you're interested that help you decolonize parts of your life?
I do a lot of environmental things just generally. So the Conservation Authority in Canada, well, at least in Ontario, is pretty robust. So they have programs. I know they have conservation authorities in the States. So like they have a lot of programs where you can just go on their site and they do things. So they'll do like, okay, we're gonna do Earth Hour and we're gonna get everybody to clean up, or
Mhm.
we're gonna go out and we're gonna talk about the local neighborhood, and we're gonna look at the trees and we're gonna look at the different animals and we're gonna look at stuff like that. I went to a really fun one last year, and it was about pollinators, and it
Hmm.
was about bees, and it was really interesting because the honeybees that we have, like they keep saying, save the honeybee, save the honeybee, but the honeybee isn't actually native to North America. And like, not that I'm against honeybees, I like honey, but that the bees, that there are hundreds of species of bees that live in little holes in the ground and stuff like that. And so that narrative of when you hear save the bees, right? And you're like, okay, well, you immediately think, well, okay, yeah, save the bees. I don't want the bees to die, right? But then you don't know the actual history behind that, of, okay, these bees are basically livestock, and that they are kind of taking up space from the actual native bees that live around here. And so looking behind things, like when companies make claims, going and being like, okay, well, let me learn about what they're saying. Why do they want me to buy this to support the bees, kind of thing. So I do a lot of community stuff with the Conservation Authority, and it's often free, so you guys should look. I don't know
I'm
if
not
Portland
sure
has
what
that.
the equivalent is, because that phrase is not what we use, and I'm blanking on what like the Department of Natural Resources, like under Department on Conservation would be, but it's something like that. I don't know that they have as cool programs as those, honestly,
Well,
especially
the
not
other
now.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
they are government funded, and then they run by, the programs often run by how many people show up, and they have to keep track that that people are coming, so that they can get the
right,
funding, so that they
right.
can do the things. So I end up doing a lot of environmental things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we do have conservation efforts, but I'm not sure what they're called in our they're probably called different things, like every state has a different name, but yeah, a good cause for sure. Hello, Hermes saying hello. Yeah, it's definitely like a state-run thing, so the programs will be called different. And Melissa's very surprised, honeybee's not native. Yeah.
It's
And then
not a common knowledge thing.
yeah, yeah. food labeling, like the wars about what you can call organic and what you can say it doesn't do, and if that's libel against other
Oh my
companies that
gosh. Okay,
so
so this
say
is an
it's
American
flammable.
audience mostly, is it? Is it mostly US?
It
Um,
depends.
so
Yeah.
now the tariffs, right? Because I live in Canada, right?
Mm.
So now with the tariffs, everybody went like just over the top with labeling of made in Canada. And then there's a difference between made in Canada, a product of Canada, two separate things. They mean different things.
Oh, okay.
Assembled in Canada,
Yeah.
assembled with materials from Canada. We have this whole tier of labeling because
Yeah.
slapping a maple leaf on something was a selling point. I
Yeah.
don't I think it died down a bit, but it's really a war zone.
Yeah. That's interesting. So I mean, I'm talking about the sort of organic food debate we've been under for like 15 to 20 years. And you're talking about something that's really recent and like very reactive in the moment now. So it's another layer, another layer. Ugh. Um, so this series, The Truth and Reconciliation for the Climate, is also a place for people to like vent climate grief. So the question that I had on that is sort of if other people are in that spot of sort of being frozen or feeling overwhelmed, tablé, if you're Melissa. I feel like I'm reaching for a word and I got the French. And not sure what to do because there's just so many things coming in at them from the food end, from the economy tariffs end, from the oppression and kidnapping on the street end. What do you recommend for people to like start to like filter these things and not go crazy?
So I have problems with this too.
Mm,
Especially in the last couple days with the news. It's
mm,
been a lot. And it can feel really overwhelming.
yeah,
Like, but it's funny because I'm a goth, but I'm not a defeatist, right? So I never get completely demoralized about the world. So what I do is what I've been doing lately is just walking away from social media and going outside. Um, I know accessibility is not the easiest for everyone, especially like if you live in areas where there are no parks or there are no trees or there like because that happens, right? And that's not anyone's fault. Or if there is like, other issues where you can't get outside, it's kind of hard. But if you can go outside, right? The minute you go outside, it's hard to think if you go for a walk in the forest, it's hard to think or keep that thought that the world is garbage because it's so nice in there. Like
yeah,
you go
yeah,
for a walk in the forest and try and think the world is garbage.
yeah.
In the forest, as you look at the trees and you listen to the birds, it's almost impossible to do. So that's what I try to do. Um, there was another thing I was gonna say, but I got excited about the forest, and now I can't remember.
Is it about the
Oh,
news? Is it
yeah,
or like the
yeah,
climate
go
grief?
watch the new. I try not to watch the like. I want to keep up with it, but at the same time, I don't want it to. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So all of us, right? We're here now, and it's a really not great time, right?
Yeah,
But like we're all like from generations and generations and generations and generations of people, and I'm really I like though I know kind of the history of my family, but I don't know the actual records because they've been lost.
right.
So I take a lot of hope from the fact that the women in my life, or my ancestors, the ones who came before me, were in really, really dire situations. Like these are people who were illiterate, were not allowed to read, were not allowed to speak their languages, were not allowed to to leave a plantation. They had to sit there and work, they had to work. They were beaten, they were kidnapped from where they were,
Yeah,
so that's very bad. Like there's no way to sort of soften that, right? but they never, if they did, they're not my ancestor, because if they gave up, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
So like, I never think, oh, it's all over. Like, it can't be. I mean, if it'll be all over when it's all over, if the world ends, it ends. There's nothing I can do about it. But they never gave up, and they had it worse than I did. So I never feel like, oh, it's not worth it. It just never happens to me. Be depressed or be a goth about it, but not. I never think, oh,
Defeatist. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Melissa's saying that's really encouraging advice. And then that later part that you were talking about, they didn't give up. That is powerful. Yeah. And then one of the things that you were just saying was, I had a
French
thought
brain
about
interference.
it. Yeah, that's when I was trying to say accablé, and I was like, what is that in English? I don't know. I don't know. There's no direct translation. And then Capo had a comment about they're in Mexico, so they're saying it's the opposite. They could pop a label saying made in Mexico, but doing that, they would not be able to justify charging the same as imported stuff. So they've got different incentives. Yeah, crazy. Yeah, no, the thing that I was going to mention is that walking in the forest, the encouraging advice that Melissa was mentioning, it's perfect because Melissa just gave a little workshop for the AuthorTube writing conference this morning that was about sustainable productivity. And I think we could work really well into that system. Like, when do you need a break to walk in the forest? Like, when do you need to walk away and get that rest period? To come back and be fortified and ready to go with the other things in your life. So yeah. Be a goth about it. Yeah. So really important. I think there's definitely the violence and bad situations people worked under that you were describing with your ancestors, and then comparing our situation to that. Obviously, they had it worse. So they're like inspiration points in terms of like keeping going, keeping up the fight. And I think the thing that drives us craziest these days is listening to the news, listening to the social media, listening to that rhythm of the world that it just keeps speeding up and speeding up, because that's not natural and it's going against all our, I think, bodily, mental, emotional needs, because we need sort of a different cycle to thrive. So that's what I'd say. Accablé. Yeah. I mean, we don't need to get into language discussion, but I just thought I'd throw it out there because you're in the audience. Melissa and I often do like little French words. One of the things that I mentioned from your bio is the Ignite Award. And so switching up from like processing and all that stuff and sort of looking into the creative work again. It's an award that you started with someone else. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Because I've never talked to someone who has started their own award before. That's really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It started kind of like with all things I do, me going, well, why don't we have this? I want it. So I'll just ask someone to make it with me and we'll have an award. But it really started in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter
Yeah.
movement,
Mhm.
and George Floyd, his murder.
Yeah.
So I have friends who run Firelit magazine, which is a Black speculative fiction magazine. And when that happened in the States, a lot of money was being donated to different causes that were related to Black writers or community organizations to sort of help. And they ended up getting a lot of money,
Mm.
more than what they needed for the magazine. So they were like, what are we going to do with this money? It's not for us, it's
Yeah.
for community. So they decided to make a conference, a virtual conference for BIPOC writers, but everyone was welcome to attend. And it ran 24 hours a day for 3 days. And during that time we had George R. R. Martin did something very interesting that year with the Hugo Awards, where he pronounced a lot of names wrong of a lot of the
Oh dear. I
a
missed that.
lot of the oh, it's a good thing you did. Of the BIPOC and international winners and nominees. And okay, you know, not everyone has the best pronunciation for every language, but it was kind of his response to the, hey, you didn't really spend any time learning anyone's name, and you talked about people from the 1950s, and we have winners here today that are, not, you're not addressing them. And he said, how am I supposed to know about other people's names? And that really didn't sit well with me and my friends. So we were like, okay, well, we'll make an award where we center diversity, and we will, it'll be a speculative fiction award. And so ever since, we've done this award, and I'm really surprised at how popular it's become. Like, it's not at the stage where it's worldwide known like the Hugos, but I'm doing a good job. I'm never like yay on myself, but for the award I am.
Yay. That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. And so you're pairing up with the literary magazine sort of administratively and raising funds wise, and then sort of like platforming wise, which is great.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't it's all the any like we have now kind of separated from the magazine. Me and LD Lewis and I run it. I do all of the human part, and she does all of the, design and put up all the graphics, because I'm not good at the computer.
Got it.
So yeah, it's so we kind of run separately now, but any money that we gain and stuff like that, it goes into the awards. Like, we don't take a paycheck, we don't do anything. It's for the community. It's for people to not feel like they're being ignored, and they're included, and people want to hear their stories. Sometimes when you're in writing land, you tend to see the same people over and over again, sort of
I don't know
upheld.
what you mean, Susan.
And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
good work too.
yeah. No, I love that because like, so the AuthorTube writing conference that's going on this weekend is exactly the same sort of thing. My friend Shannon was like, I wish we had a conference that was for people online who didn't want to go and spend hundreds of dollars, and it was free and it was accessible, and it tries to give the same
Expensive.
advice.
Yeah.
And so she started it 4 years ago, and this is the fourth one. And she's recruited different people, and different people have gotten loads of experience and networking and promotional opportunities, and it's great. So like if you have
What's it called? AuthorTube?
AuthorTube Writing Conference, AWC.
Okay.
So it's going on right now. It's closing today. And yeah, I think that's totally inspiring. So Melissa is saying yes. When you are a person who realizes the world is not as you want it to be, but you're kind of casting around for like what you can do to make it better, I think one of the most important things is like, well, you have your passion project, your discipline, your work in the world. And like, if you have expertise in that, what does that give you to give to others? Like the platform or the space or the the funding if it's a different situation. And yeah, so it's the same kind of thing. Even if it's tiny, even if it starts out tiny, maybe it'll get huge, like the Ignite Awards. So I love that.
Small things matter.
Yeah, 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 especially if it's so that people don't feel ignored and discounted. I follow a lot of Black, Indigenous, people of color channels on Booktube and AuthorTube, and there's sort of a cycle of up and down of people doing their regular channel stuff, and then every once in a while it's like, okay, so we had all this attention and now like there's silence, so that's actually hurting the channel. And can you guys engage, and like, can you show us that you weren't just being performative and all this kind of stuff? And it's important to keep that in mind, that like, if you know the world is unequal, like you need to keep doing the thing to pull the beads of the abacus up and down as they should be pulled. So like, yeah, it's a long, hard slog, just, the decolonizing slog. Or maybe I can name a dance after it, the decolonizing shuffle. So that like, just keep going, just keep going. uh, let's see, what other questions do I have? Did you have any other things that were popping up that you wanted to like discourse on?
I think you had asked something about solutions. Did I imagine that?
Yes. So I think this is the last question that I have. Alternative models. So I asked about kind of solutions in fiction, which I don't think we can pull out of the novella, but have you explored alternative models to our current one? And do you do that in real life when you're looking at the news or organizations, or do you do that in fiction when you're talking about, how to convince people to work for those solutions?
I think that's a really interesting question because like I'm not a politician. So I don't ever sit down like so the question you asked, like the Ignite Awards is an example, right? So
Yeah.
like there's a problem, and then I had this idea, and then I was like, okay, well, why don't we do this, and we'll try it out, right? And we'll see how it works. Um, and it was a very sort of not definitive thing. It wasn't well planned out the first year. I think we pulled it off in a month. Now it takes me 6 months to do all of that stuff, but I
Yeah.
don't know. It was all adrenaline that I like did it all in a month.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm I'm wary of the word solution.
Mm.
Because I don't like I said, I'm not a strategizer, and I'm not a person who sits and maps out a plan of how I'm going to solve a problem in society specifically. And I feel like what I want to do with the work is what we talked about earlier, cause people to question the system
Hmm.
and then cause people to discuss what they think would be better. Because if I come in and I say, this is a problem and I know exactly how to solve the problem, right? I feel like I'm taking on the voice of the people, like I'm sounding like the people who caused the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Right? And
Good
so
tutorial.
if we think in this way where it's like, okay, there's a problem and now I'm going to give you a solution, what sometimes what also happens is in this middle transition part, people are like, well, you said you were going to fix it and it's not fixed. Well, things don't get fixed like that. Like your history, so not your history, but you your
Yeah.
history,
My
right?
viewpoint.
So you know that things are flowing and things are going up and down, or like it's threads. And so you can't just be like, okay, well, here's a problem and we are going to fix it, and it's going to be fixed in 6 months. I mean, there are some things that you could do with that. Maybe if they gave homeless people apartments, that would really immediately fix some of their issues. But most things I don't think just have I'm going to come in and do this and it will fix it, because you have to consider all of the implications. And so my thing is much more, okay, well, there is a problem. I don't like this. Why is it like this? Maybe cause other people to to talk about it with me, and then we'll see if we come up with a solution, and then we'll try it. And it could fail,
Hmm.
but you learn something from the failing of it. Like
Right.
that's kind of what I want to be doing.
Writers know. Writers know. You learn something from the failure, right? Hopefully.
Yeah, like if
Nice.
something fails, right? That's like it's a good thing because you've learned that doesn't work.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So before I forget the thought, there's a thing that you were making here's the problem, here's the solution, people in the middle. And I had a different way that I was perceiving your hand movements, which was like, people will believe a simple solution that's a lie because it's easier for them. And you're like, how is that possible? How are you believing that? That's just abrogating your responsibilities. Like, come on, give me a break. So you need time to try things and fail, but you also need to like involve the people in that. It's not just someone who's going to fix it for you. So like you said,
Yes.
you don't want to be a dictator. You don't want to say what the solution is and then have people lose faith because it doesn't happen. But they won't lose faith if it doesn't happen if they're involved in the bringing about of the trying of the things, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's
that's a very good point.
yeah.
You know, if
To
everybody feels responsible in it, then they're all sort of trying to see the thing through till the end.
mhm. And how do you get people to feel responsible without shame or guilt, or is one of those needed?
No, I actually don't think shame or guilt is absolutely needed. I mean, it's useful sometimes. But I mean, I don't know. I there's been an election in New York for a primary. I didn't understand how these elections worked because I'm in Canada. So
Yeah,
I thought
primary.
I thought he was the mayor.
Yeah,
And I was like, no, he's not the mayor yet. He's just allowed to run for mayor.
again.
But what I've seen, and there's a I this is part of the reason why I've left social media the last few days is because the rhetoric around this has been really, really brutal for me
Yeah.
to listen to about immigrants, about stuff like that. It's really rough. But what he seems to have done is been able to talk to different groups because he did ads in Spanish. He did ads in his native language. He did music for I think it was, I forget the country, but he had done some Uganda, and
Oh,
he had done stuff with that. And so he found commonality with all of the people,
yeah.
and I think that's just as useful. And people don't like being shamed. They don't like feeling bad.
Yeah.
I think my book made some people feel bad.
Mm,
But I was like, well, you know, I gotta do what I gotta do. But I don't always think that is. I don't think that's the only tool.
yeah. That makes me think of the book banning, the selective book banning, because you don't want to make white kids feel bad about atrocities in the past. And I'm like, well, they don't have to stop there. That's the initial feeling. You hopefully grow past that and figure out what you can do to change the world as it is, right? Like hopefully you don't just feel bad and stop. That's not the point. Like the books were supposed to encourage, greater
Yeah, and I mean, there's no reason for. I I'm not gonna get too personal, but my partner is white.
Mm,
And so like you don't have to be like, oh well, now you're like, now you're a horrible person and none of us will ever be speaking to you again. Like that's not how it works. Like
right.
people are people.
We need everyone. Yeah. All right. So any last questions? This is the last call because we're rounding out our hour here.
This has been great.
Yeah, really good. I'm so glad you agreed to come on. And
So
even though it's at the end of your like publicity season and you do need a rest. So Kappa says, I know how to fix it. Makes a lot of people complacent and then no real change. Yeah. Yep. Totally true. And then Melissa says, being willing to try, fail, and adapt is the key to real change and listening to those with lived experience. Yes. Yeah. Great comments. Great comments. And doing it in fiction counts, right? Doing it in our own works of expertise, I think, is part of our contribution. So I sometimes don't think it's enough, and I just have to affirm that for myself. And maybe that gives permission to someone watching this on the replay. I don't know. Okay, so last question: what new threads are pulling into your next projects? Where should we be following or looking for you in the future?
so I've mentioned to you before what my book is, but I can't really say too much, but it is very gothic horror climate focused. So my next book, if someone buys it, please someone buy my book. Um, there is, yeah, um, is going to be historical and uh about colonialism and gothic horror, and it's very gay book. So that is what my book is about. But this summer, I told you I'm taking time off, right? So I'm writing a vampire novella that's just romance and nothing. I mean, I guess it's serious, but it's just vampire girls.
You'll have to figure out what subconsciously you've put into the narrative afterwards. Like,
What kind of activism am I writing about? I'll find out in November when it's
yeah,
done.
yeah,
Like, I don't know. I just want to be silly.
yeah.
So
There's a place for that. I have a friend on Booktube, Leslie. Her channel is called Books, Gers, and Purrs, and she's doing a 2-year-long sort of reading project where she does a deep dive into the Anne Rice series that's been turned into a TV
Oh,
show.
Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, and so the different
Does
new
she like the
characters.
show? Does she
Yeah,
like the show?
yes. So she's going through lots of different interesting, diverse reading picks that would be in different characters' libraries and doing buddy reads. And it's like super intense. So like,
What is it called again? I have a friend who is obsessed with Interview. I like it too, but she's obsessed. What is it called?
okay, so I'm putting Leslie's channel in the chat, and that is her channel name if you want to pass it on. But yeah, I
Yeah.
love, yeah, Gers and Purrs. She's got 2 cats that are quite the chaos gremlins. So yeah, silliness and joy can be a form of resistance. Yeah, and you can also go deep with it, like what brings you joy.
Yeah,
And
I mean, we'll do the silly part and then after be like, oh no, this was totally serious.
have it both ways. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say have your cake and eat it too, and then I was like, oh, I didn't even touch on the food. So like decolonize your food, right? So I
Yeah,
love the fact that you had such delicious descriptions of Caribbean food,
my
cultural
mother
heritage
cooks all of
food.
that.
Yeah.
All of the food. Oh my God. Okay, I gotta take my glasses off for this one. This lady, okay? This lady, you know how you said venting? Okay, here, we're gonna have a little vent here.
Yes, yes.
This lady reviewed my book, and she was not happy that I included actual Trinidadian food with actual Trinidadian ingredients in the book because she said in the review, and I don't respond to reviews. I didn't say anything to her at all. She's free to say what she wants. So she can go in peace. But she did not like that I put Trinidadian food in the book, specifically the same ingredients that we use. She was like, "Why did I not make up scientific ingredients from
Oh, okay.
space?" Right? So it's always funny for me whenever people are like, "Oh, I really love the food in the book. I love," and it is my food. Like it's the food that my
Yeah.
mother cooks, right? Because there's this other side who um they're like, "Why did you include so much food, real food in the book?" Like opinions exist.
Yeah. True. True. And salty opinions exist in reaction to that. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I was like, "All
Oh,
right,
yeah, yeah.
I'm not inviting you over for dinner."
Oh man, virtual food invite. That would be a fun thing if you ever did like a Kickstarter or any sort of like auction.
Someone asked if I would like put together the recipes and stuff. The problem with getting recipes from Caribbean people is that they don't know how they cook anything. They're just
Ah,
like, "I
it's all instinct.
just throw this and I don't know," and they have no idea what, like they don't have that sort of process.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
just do it. And
That's a
so,
colonizer mindset, right?
yeah, that's like you gotta decolonize with the
Yeah.
instructions,
Yeah.
like because it's not taught the way that we're taught. I mean, the instructions are a language that we share, right? That every
Mhm.
can make it understandable. But they speak a different language where they understand. It's like, oh well, first you do this and you just throw this after, and then the other friends understand what that means.
Right, right. That's true. And then I think there also exist people on the other side of the spectrum that closely guard secrets and don't want to share.
Oh,
Like,
that's true.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
Which is fine, your family can be known for its thing, like, that's a cool thing too. Oh, man. That's a brilliant example. I'm glad we got to close with, like, the food and the varying viewpoints and, like yeah. Yeah. For people who love food in their novels, definitely read Countess. So I'll pop that back up just for a moment. Use Bookshop link, help the channel. You can find Suzan on Blue Sky. Every once in a while, we're being balanced, we're being measured, we're guarding our boundaries and social safety, I think, on that, and that's totally cool. But thank you for coming on
Many
today.
people are here, but thanks for having me on, and your comments were lovely. This has been lovely.
Yay! Thank you. Last comment. So if anyone else is interested in a certain topic that they think would really work well for truth and reconciliation for the climate, let me know if something particularly vexes you and you want to vent or discourse about it, because I'd love to have more guests through the end of the year. Next month, I will be having my friend Allie, who is a bookshop owner, and she'll be a great guest for TRC. And other than that, thank you for watching. Remember, diversify that reading list, take a tiny step, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you all soon in the ether or otherwise. Thank you, everybody.